Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Mind Movement Health podcast. I'm your host, Kate Boyle, and today I have a very special guest on the show. Terry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Kate. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm super excited to have you on today because we're going to be chatting about aging, but aging in a healthy way, thinking about it as like an opportunity rather than a decline. But before we dive in, can you please introduce yourselves to our listeners?
Absolutely. So I am Terry Tateossian, a lifestyle medicine coach who is also a personal trainer, nutritionist, hormone specialist, emotional eating coach. And I started this journey about, I would say, 12 years ago at 37 when perimenopause hit me unexpectedly, unbeknownst to me, and everything went haywire. And that's where I started.
Well, I'm sure a lot of our listeners can kind of relate to that. A majority of our listeners are kind of in that sort of perimenopause or menopause stage. And it is a stage of life that I think, at least there's more information coming about nowadays, but a lot of changes occur. And it can be a bit scary as a woman as you sort of hit that and see all these things starting to change.
Yes. So at the time, so I'm almost 49. At 37, I had just had a baby 2 years prior. So my son was born at 35. At 37, I was still wearing pregnancy clothes. I think all the way to 40, I was wearing pregnancy clothes. So perimenopause was not anywhere in my realm of thoughts. I mistakenly believed or thought that perimenopause enters the arena at about 50, 55, but that was not my experience. And so it really caught me off guard. On top of that, I was 80 pounds overweight. And just for reference, I'm 5'3". And so that was quite a bit of weight for me. And yeah, it created the perfect storm.
Menopause. Well, we often hear, I'm 42, so I reckon I'm kind of at the start of that menopause, perimenopause journey, only just sort of starting to hit it now. But even I've noticed, like you, I have a background in nutrition and movement, and I know all the right things. But I've noticed that my hormones, have started to change. My cycle is slightly different. Even my nutrition, I've had to really dial that in because that little bit of sort of weight around the middle has just started to creep in, before I made any of those changes. Nothing had changed. But again, coming back to that perimenopause piece and those hormones changing, your body just doesn't sort of react to things the way it used to.
100%, right? So as our hormones are fluctuating and it's all very normal, I like to call it the second coming of adolescence. If you think about what adolescents go through, they sleep a lot more, right? They need a lot more food, protein mostly. They're going through a growth spurt. Their hormones are going haywire and lots of changes are happening. And it's very similar for women as we're going through perimenopause. So our sleep pattern changes. Possibly we're not sleeping as well or as deeply or as much as we really need to. We're probably extremely stressed. We have more responsibilities at work, more hectic schedules. Possibly we have teenagers at this point, so that adds the extra level of complexity. We have possibly aging parents we need to take care of and become caretakers for both children and aging parents. And so a lot of things are going on. It's so easy to miss the signs because we're so busy and yeah, not take care of ourselves. And then on top of that, we're made to believe that, you know, restricting calories is a good way to manage our potential weight gain here and there. We're not really encouraged to go to the gym or especially the weight lift room as much. Women are intimidated often. And so I feel like it is a recipe for a lot of confusion, a lot of insecurity, and just not knowing where to start.
Mm. So if there is somebody listening in that's like, oh, this is kind of sounding like me, and I'm definitely in that period of my life, where should they start to look after themselves?
Well, number one, sleep, right? So if you're not sleeping well, everything else is going down the drain, right? You're not going to have good energy throughout the day. You're not going to be craving healthy food. You're going to want things that are high carb, lots of sugar, high in fat, just to keep your energy up throughout the day. You're not going to want to work out. You're going to be stressed. You're not going to be in a great mood. So sleep, number one, above all else. And then start paying attention to your nutrition, things that might have worked in the past, where severely restricting calories may have worked for you in your 20s. That's not going to work in our favor in our midlife. So we need a lot more food than you're normally accustomed to in the form of protein, in the form of carbs. They are not the enemy, and the right amount of fat. And on top of that, we want to protect our bones. We want to protect our muscle mass. So most people have probably heard that almost as early as about 30 years old, we start to see decline in bone mass and muscle mass. And so that's a protective activity where you're doing load-bearing type of exercises and doing resistance training with progressive overload. It's not just for men, and it's not going to make you look like a man. You're not going to get bulky. You're just going to feel better, more balanced, and just overall, like just stronger.
Which is what we need, as you said, for our bones, our muscles, and for, longevity as well.
Exactly.
Now, when it comes to training, and you mentioned progressive overload, there may be some of our listeners that aren't sure what that means. Can you kind of explain a little bit more about what progressive overload is and how people can start to do that in their training?
Yes. So I'm going to go first. I'm going to go over what it is not. Progressive overload or resistance training, because I hear this often and I hear this a lot. It is not walking. It is not yoga. It is not Pilates. Resistance training with progressive overload is its own modality. Now, progressive overload can mean a lot of different things. It's not only weight, right? It's not only adding more weight to the machine or the bar or the dumbbell. There are many different variables that contribute to progressive overload. For example, you can be doing tempo work, so slowing down the movement on the eccentric part of the lift, for example, or you could be spending less time resting between sets. You can be adding partial reps. You can be adding all kinds of different variables that you can manipulate in order to achieve progressive overload.
Mm. And if people are sort of aiming to start to do that in their training, is it a good thing that they're writing it down or tracking it, or is it, can they just try to remember it, or, what's the best approach?
Yes, well, when I'm lifting weights, I can't even add. Math and my brain are not working well, because you're working hard, right? So your body's busy doing other things. 100% tracking. You cannot measure things that you don't track, right? So, for example, if you're balancing a budget in a company or you're the accountant, you're tracking how much you spend, how much the income is, and you're balancing the books. If you are an athlete and you're looking to, for example, run a certain minute mile, you're going to be tracking all these things. Same thing with weightlifting. So you want to track your progress to see whether you are getting indeed stronger in especially compound lifts, but across the board as well. So it's always helpful to write things down and track them over time.
Mm. And if someone is listening in and they haven't really done any type of resistance training or, weight training before, where should they start?
So it's always a good idea to take an audit, right? So first of all, hire a coach, hire a professional that will help you kind of get the lay of the land, because there's a lot of different machines in a gym. Most people don't know where to start. I had no idea where to start. When I started, I did not know what DB stood for, which was a dumbbell. I didn't know what an RDL was. I was like, what kind of language is this, right? So I needed the education and the support and the guidance to know, okay, go do this exact thing, and here's how you do it, and then progress on to the next exercise and the next exercise. Trying to wing it, in my personal opinion, did not do me any favors. So do an audit, possibly get a trainer at your local gym, get a coach online, find out where you're at physically. What are your injuries? What's your exercise history? Have you been an athlete before? Have you ever done anything, in the athletic realm? Are you overweight? Are you underweight? All of these factors matter. It's a very nuanced type of thing. So one size fits all is kind of difficult, but ultimately you want to start where you're at. All right. So if you have participated in sports in the past, you might have a little bit of knowledge. You might be able to start in a different place than someone who's been sedentary for a few years and is just beginning. If that's the case, then I would recommend body weight exercises, chair exercises, things like that.
Yeah, great. And I think that's, everything you said is, spot on, that you really need to get that audit done first, especially if, you're listening in and maybe you've even had osteoporosis or being diagnosed with osteopenia. It's not to say that weightlifting and stuff is off the table, but you do need to know what's safe and, a safe load to start with for your right, condition.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's always a way to work around injuries as well, for example. So a lot of times I'll hear, well, I have a knee injury, so I can't do squats, or, I can't do barbell work, or, whatever that may be. And that may be the case. However, that does not mean that there aren't other machines that can help you strengthen your knees or your shoulders or your core or your back, in a safe way. For example, one of the machines that I absolutely love is the Pilates Reformer, because it's a horizontal type of machine where you lay down and you can apply pressure with your legs. Now, of course, someone that has no experience or has not worked with clients, and is just starting out may not know all of these things, which is why I always recommend a good trainer.
Well, Pilates is my realm, so that's where we start with our clients. We always make sure we do a proper thorough intake. And as you said, a client just said yesterday that her friend wanted to start Pilates, but she's got a knee injury. So she had said, "Oh, I can't start because I've got a knee injury." And I'm like, "Yes, you can. There's lots of other things we can work on, and we can actually work on the strength of it as well, because that's, what we can do in class with the piece of equipment." So, yeah, spot on. Now, I want to talk about some other natural ways to support our bodies as we age. Now, we've sort of touched on sleep and, exercise and a little bit on nutrition, but how big a part does stress play, and what are some things we can do to help manage our stress?
Oh my gosh, stress. There's so many different kinds of stress, right? You have emotional stress, people stress, professional stress. Your body is under stress when we're going through midlife and perimenopause. And so, personally, my opinion is that setting really firm boundaries and getting your priorities straight, which is what I had to do when I first started this, was critical. Because when you're living a life of yes, yes, yes to everybody, when you're living a life of people pleasing constantly, you end up having no time. Your time gets eaten up by all the activities and all the people that you allow into your timeline for the day. So getting rid of things or saying no to things, sometimes that includes activities, people, work projects, home projects. Sometimes maybe you don't clean your house as often, but you end up going to the gym or taking a class. Might be a better idea sometimes than running things the way that you're used to running, because you're changing, things are changing. And so we need to adapt to our new body, the new stage of life that we're in, and shift things around. So reducing stress, I think, is a really big deal, because we're overwhelmed, overworked. A lot of us are overweight, and they all go hand in hand, in my opinion.
100%. And like you said, our body is changing and therefore our priorities need to change. So where previously, having that immaculate house may have been super important, now's the time to sort of put our body more into focus, and whether or not, it's going for a walk so you can take a break and get into nature and, calm those stress levels down, or going off to do prioritizing that class, to really work on that strength. I think that's where we kind of just need to sometimes really evaluate those things, which is hard to do.
Yeah, so at the retreats that I do, breath work, meditation, yoga, and we do mat Pilates because we only have one reformer. I personally, when I do the classes at the retreats, I can literally feel my nervous system calming down just from practicing the meditation, breath work, yoga, Pilates. There is a component to that that really soothes down your stress level, you soothes down your nervous system. And because we're living in constant dysregulation, we have kind of forgotten what it feels like to be inside of our own bodies. We're constantly living up in our minds. We're overthinking. A lot of us have, me included, perfectionistic tendencies. We're overanalyzing things, and that only contributes to additional stress on top of the environmental stress that we have, because that's the other thing, right? So the chemicals, the pollution, the fragrances and everything in our household, from makeup to dishwasher liquid to everything, has some type of a pollutant that's also creating environmental stress. We have societal stress, we have hormonal stress, we have all kinds of things going on. So just calming down the nervous system, I think, is also a critical component, which is why yoga and Pilates are a great tool for that.
And going back to that sort of breathwork piece, even if you can't get to a class, if you can just practice, some of your breathing where you breathe in for, say, 4 counts and you breathe out for 8 counts at, longer exhale, that can just have, an effect of resetting the nervous system without taking a whole lot of time, or needing to, go get changed and invest in a class as such.
Exactly, exactly. And it's so interesting because very recently, so I'm not an expert in this, but very recently I learned about lymphatic drainage, and I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with this. There's apparently a lymph node in our belly that we can only manipulate or massage through breath work. And I was shocked to hear this, but apparently that's one of the lymph nodes that actually drains into the terminus, which is right by the collarbones, the little triangles in the collarbones. That's where all of the toxins actually drain in our body and enters the blood system. And then the blood system excretes it out as a bowel movement or urine or etc. And so I was like, wow, this has so many benefits to it that we don't even know about. And people just think it's just, oh, just breathe in and out, breathe in and out. What's the big deal? It does. It detoxifies your body physically and mentally and emotionally.
It's funny you bring that up. It's actually been the lymphatic system's been coming up a lot in my classes lately. I've got one lady that's just had, well, she's just recovered from chemotherapy from having breast cancer, and so she's got some lymphedema that we've been dealing with. And then because I never say it correctly, the gouache, the lymphatic massage for your face with the tools. A lot of
Yep.
clients, yeah, a lot of clients have been asking about that too. So it's interesting. I really think that the lymphatic system is kind of almost having a moment now, which is great because, as you said, it's super important for detoxification. And another, pose that I always encourage my clients to do is lying down onto their back and putting their legs up the wall, just to do 5 minutes in the evening. Again, really great for that lymphatic system, especially if you've been traveling and you get any sort of swelling in the feet and the ankles. But touching on that sort of lymphatic system and detoxification, where should people start at home when it comes to sort of looking at what they've got and what to detoxify so they can kind of reduce their chemical load?
Oh, YouTube. That's where I went down this rabbit hole with the lymphatic system because I was fascinated. I mean, if you go on YouTube and you find some lymphatic doctors that are reputable, they will explain. There's like charts and maps and graphs, and it shows you all the different nodes in your body, all the different pathways, and how you can massage very gently, all the different nodes in the body. There's, I think, seven main ones. One is in the belly. You do it through breath work. And it's fascinating. And just putting this into practice, maybe like 3 minutes to 5 minutes a day, I have personally seen extreme results. Like, for example, at one of our retreats, we did a dry brush session where we only did one half of our face. So it wasn't the gua sha, but it was a lymphatic dry brush. And we followed the YouTube video. We did one side of our face. It was absolutely mind blowing because when we looked at ourselves and each other, you can see the difference between the face that you did dry brush versus the part of the face that you did not. It was a lot less puffy. There was, it just looked different. It looked better. It looked fresher. So I was like, wow, like why do we not know about this?
That's it. A simple thing to do. As you said, it only takes a minute or two, but people don't know that it's even out there.
Yes, exactly. And it's my mission. I'm like, I don't want any gatekeeping. I want to share all these things because the body is a fascinating organism. It's a machine, in my opinion. It's intelligent, right? So we have all this chatter about artificial intelligence, this and that, this and that. Well, the body is the most naturally intelligent being, machine, vehicle, terrain that we have, and it operates automatically all the time, but we don't have the manual, right? And we're kind of blindly just feeling our way through life without having the operating manual of our own body. So I find all this extremely interesting. So yeah, I could talk about it for hours.
That's what I think where you sort of said before, working with a professional, whether or not it's, for your exercise or for your nutrition, that's where you're going to educate yourself. And then you get that flow on effect. Once you learn more about your sleep and you find out, how it affects your nutrition and what you choose to eat and all the rest of it, it really does have that flow on effect to other areas of your health as well.
Yes, so the basics, right? So, a lot of people I've noticed try to jump into the more advanced stuff when they don't have the basics figured out. So your sleep, your nutrition, your movement, your stress level, and substance abuse, right? So that's kind of like the boogeyman and all the closets out there, alcohol and things like that. So once you have those kind of figured out and you feel like you can manage those five things, then it just gets really like you go into level 2 and 10 into the video game of your own body and you start figuring things out and you're just like, holy cow.
And how, when it comes to sort of perimenopause and that change, what role does alcohol play? Because I know, there's many people out there that really love their sort of, 5 or 6 o'clock glass of wine with dinner or, a drink before dinner and then a drink with dinner. How do these sorts of habits around alcohol affect us as we hit midlife?
So alcohol is technically a toxin, right? It's ethanol. And maybe before we hit perimenopause, maybe our body is really efficient at processing and detoxifying us from alcohol intake. Of course, we've all heard about alcohol poisoning. There's a reason why it's called poisoning, right? When you overconsume it. But in midlife when all these other changes are taking place, when your body is already overwhelmed and overstressed and lots of changes are going on at the same time, adding alcohol actually could overflow how much your body can handle. Now, the other thing that happens when you are consuming alcohol is that there are a lot of sugars and calories in alcohol that most people don't track. And so when your body's in the middle of all these changes, even adding 300 to 400 extra calories per day in the form of a drink, which is super easy, can have you start gaining weight, right? So I just recently got off a call where we did a calculation. In order to gain 5 pounds in 2 months, all you have to do is eat 300 calories extra per day. That's what, 2 glasses of wine
Yeah.
over your maintenance calories, right? And so as our body's changing, our maintenance calories are changing, our movement habits and patterns are changing. Maybe we're moving a little less, maybe we're consuming a little bit extra alcohol or sugar or whatever else. And there you go. The weight gain starts to creep up very easily. And then our minds say, oh, there's something wrong with you. You know, you got to restrict all your food. You got to cut all your calories down. You got to do 5 hours of cardio a day. And now your metabolism starts to kind of downshift and say, whoa, whoa, what's going on? And so, yeah, I mean, alcohol is if you're still able to tolerate it without any side effects, if it doesn't affect your sleep, which by the way, it does. A lot of people falsely believe that it helps them go to sleep, which it may seem that way, but they don't actually get deep REM sleep when they have drank alcohol because the body's busy detoxifying. It interferes with weight loss if you're in a weight loss phase. It does a lot of things to your body.
Yes, well, as you were sort of mentioning there, if we are having alcohol, our liver has to work over time to kind of detoxify the alcohol first. And so any of those other sort of chemicals and things that we may be exposed to during the day, that kind of goes on the burner until that alcohol has been processed. So then we almost, can lead to getting that sort of toxin buildup and that toxic overload because our liver never really gets the chance to stop processing the alcohol if we're having it, regularly.
Exactly. But a lot of people have a hard time giving it up.
Mm. And that's the conversations that I have with people often around the sort of nutrition side of things when we're looking at maybe weight loss and, you're looking for that sort of low hanging fruit. And I'm like, please don't make me give up my wine at dinner. Please don't make me, and, we've just talked about alcohol as a toxin. It is a poison. It's bad for the brain, it's bad for your overall health. There aren't really any health benefits at all, but it's still the one thing that people don't really want to give up.
I completely agree with you. It is. They're dependent on it essentially. So it's become a habit. It's become an addiction. It's you know, it's a problem, really.
Mm. And I think it's just something for, listeners, if you're listening in, you kind of are hitting that midlife or you just before that sort of stage at midlife, just have a look at your relationship with alcohol, have kind of a reevaluation, see if you can go for a period of time without it, see if your sleep changes, and, how your energy feels and how your skin looks. And then, then try to redefine going forward from there, your relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, something I like to ask, because I did have an alcohol problem in my late 30s. And it I was delusional, really, right? So it started with glass of wine here and there. And then it was, oh, that's not enough. I'm not getting what I'm looking for out of it. So then it was 2 and 3 and 4 glasses of wine as a bottle. So now I'm into an entire bottle of wine per night. And that wasn't doing enough, right? So at some point, your body develops a resistance or it adapts to the alcohol. So now I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? Now we're into vodka, right? So now we're into much harder liquor. And now one glass of vodka wasn't doing the job, and then two, and then three. And then it's like, whoa, like when does this stop, right? So you really need to ask yourself, why are you drinking whatever it is you might be drinking? And are you able to stop, right? Because addiction ultimately is the inability to stop. Once you start drinking, it just it keeps going, right? So one glass leads to another five. And that wasn't your intention, right? So nobody really wakes up one day and says, I'm going to drink an entire bottle of vodka. Like it doesn't start that way. It just creeps up on you. And so, asking a lot of questions, being curious about what is the intention behind the drink? What is the intention behind the wine? Are you emotionally dependent on it? Is it just a habit that you've developed over the years? What is the purpose of it? Why do you need it? Is there a substitution that you can use? And as far as ritualistically, as far as that's concerned, right? So if it's just a habit and it's a ritual for you and it helps you calm down your nervous system just by preparing the drink. Most of the time, that's all you really need. You don't actually need to drink it. What's behind it? So you can kind of unpack the reason why you're participating in that particular behavior. And that goes for anything else, right? So that goes for eating food or the types of foods that you eat, or are they meeting your goals? Is that your priority? etc. So that generally that's the approach I like to take, is just be curious. Why can't you stop?
Mm. And also, there are alternatives and swaps out there, as in, like, you can get non-alcoholic if it's, like you said, it's sort of the process of the habitualness of having that wine with dinner, swap it out for a non-alcohol version, or have a kombucha. So it's not just plain water, but it's still got some type of flavor. There are, lots of different non-alcoholic beverages that are kind of being developed now. I think it's kind of a whole new space as well, one of the biggest growing spaces in kind of the food and beverage industry. So, lots of other choices out there too. And kind of like you said, come curious and maybe understand that you're probably not going to get it right, 100% of the time, but just by becoming curious and looking at that relationship that you have with the alcohol or sugar or whatever it may be, you're kind of on that sort of first step to making that change.
Great point. Right. So they have non-alcoholic beer, non-alcoholic, even whiskey and cognac. I've seen wine, absolutely. There's all kinds of options right now where you have a substitution that you can put into place while you're working on the withdrawal symptoms from the actual alcohol.
Mm. And I think, like we said, if the more or the less you can drink, the better, especially as we kind of hit midlife, but not just for our body, but also our brain, especially, as we are hitting, perimenopause and our estrogen levels are changing, and we can experience sort of symptoms like brain fog and, loss of sort of short-term memory loss and things like that in relation to that drop in estrogen. The more that we can kind of support our bodies through that, the better it's going to be.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. There's a clear need for additional care, additional self-care. And I'm not talking about, getting our nails done or hair. I'm talking about the internal self-care. So having that inner voice that has more compassion towards yourself, towards really caring about what kind of voice and tone you're using internally in your inner dialogue, because a lot of us have grown up with kind of really mean inner voices, and that doesn't help as we're transitioning into midlife, because there's a lot going on, right? And so self-care in that sense, I think, is critical. Connection with other women or other people that care about you. There's I mean, an astronomical amount of loneliness going on that is, I think, affecting people way more than we care to admit. That contributes also to alcohol abuse and all kinds of things. So it's a revolving door of things, right? So having compassion, having connection, having a purpose that's bigger than just, oh, how do I look and what do people think of me? Having a growth mindset. So constantly evolving and learning new things and being excited about things, helping other people, and being in service to other people is another thing I feel is underrated and not really talked about enough. So yeah.
And I agree. And I think sometimes too, especially if you're a mum and you have kids and maybe you had interests before having kids and then you kind of give up those interests because you get busy with work and raising a family, then you can hit your sort of 40s and kind of go, oh, I don't have a lot of friends. I don't have a big community anymore because I've, kind of put the last 5, 10 years of my life into raising kids and, working. I think that's when we need to start looking at, what lights us up, what activities did we used to do? What can we get back into, whether or not that's, painting or Pilates or whatever, and finding community and connection by going back to some of those activities and meeting new friends again.
Yes, I think it's critical. I think it's critical, especially in midlife, because it's so hard, right? It's so hard to make friends in midlife, to keep friends, to even have the same interests. So I encourage people to, if they have an interest, join a group, join a community, go travel together, do things together. That's why I run retreats for women, specifically in the Smoky Mountains, so that they can come and meet other women that have the same types of interests. And so, yeah, all this stuff, it's all important.
And I think that sort of community and connection piece, people kind of don't realize how important it is. You can dial in those basics, as we said, your movement and your sleep and your nutrition and that. But especially for women, because we do tend to be, our personality wise tend to, really crave that connection with other people. I think that's an important part that a lot of people sort of miss.
Yes, I personally think the reason why I succeeded in my weight loss journey is because I did have the support of a community of women that were going through the same thing. And I mean, it's been quite a while now. I think over 5, 7 years, something like that. We're still friends. We meet up together. We travel together. We do things together. We talk to each other, and it's life changing, really.
Agree. And if, there's listeners listening in that are like, oh, when it comes to that sort of weight loss piece, that's the real main concern as they're kind of hitting midlife. They're like, yeah, I know about my exercise and I'm definitely working on my sleep, but I know I'm carrying a bit of extra weight and I'm really struggling to lose it. Where do you suggest that they sort of start to help with that?
So it's the same way as with any kind of fitness program, right? So you want to audit what your nutrition looks like for about 7 to 10 days and see what your average caloric intake is, right? Now, a lot of times what I notice with women, I only work with women, is a very inconsistent caloric intake. So one day I'll see 600 calories, next day I'll see 2,500 calories, and it just goes up and down, up and down. Average it out. What's the average number of calories that you're taking in on a daily basis? And then based on that, figure out how much protein, how many carbs, how much fat, stay within those calories. Just change the structure, change the composition of the macro. So, let's say you're a 170-pound woman, you would like to lose about 30 pounds, you want to be about 140. So that to me says you need to be at about 140 grams of protein per day, and then break the rest of the calories up into carbs and fat and stick to that for about a month. And let me know how much weight you lose, because I promise you, you will.
And if someone listening in just gone, oh my goodness, 140 grams of protein, how do I get that into my body in a day? How can you break that down?
So 140 grams of protein is actually not that much. It's very easy to get that. So you can start with a 0% Greek yogurt, add a little bit of protein powder or PB2 powder. Egg whites with a couple of yolks. There you go. That's about another 30 grams of protein. Make a salad with some shrimp. There you go. That's another 30 grams of protein. You can make a protein brownie as a snack. That's your fourth meal. And then you can have dinner. So whatever your dinner would be, something like 99% ground turkey burger with, all the sides on the side and half a bun, for example, right? And that's probably about 150, what I just told you.
Yeah, so it can be done, listeners. It definitely can be done. And I guess that's where, that planning and being aware of what you're eating really is that sort of main piece. It's becoming more aware and then also more organized around what you're putting in your body. So it is really becoming very purposeful.
Exactly. So planning in advance is the key here, especially when it comes to macros or hitting your nutritional goals. Winging it or tracking contemporaneously, meaning, oh, what do I feel like eating right now? Let me just figure it out on the fly and kind of wing it. That doesn't work. All right. So you want to have a pre-planned strategy going into the week and saying, okay, I'm going to make these, let's say, 8 meals over and over and over again for the next week. So I'm just going to move the meals around but I'm going to eat the same things over and over again. And my staples, let's say, are going to be whatever it is that you like to eat. But I just rattled off all lean protein sources. So you can be creative with how you make your yogurt, right? So it could be a yogurt parfait with berries and granola and, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, a little bit of peanut butter on top. You can create all kinds of different flavors, but ultimately your building blocks stay the same. And then you're just, create the flavors as your mood swings, but the protein, the sources, the nutritional sources are the same. And so I think there's a lot of confusion out there because we make it very complicated, right? We feel like we have to eat something different every single time, every single meal, every single day. It has to be a completely new menu, but that's not really sustainable. So once you kind of figure out the tricks, the professional little tricks of the trade, it becomes pretty simple.
Mm. And I like that you mentioned that because I'm the type of person I just like eating the same thing for breakfast every day. I don't like changing it up. I know what I like, I know what works for me, and so therefore I stick to it. But then you see things online and they're like, have eggs this day, have these protein pancakes next day, have this, and so you feel like, oh, I have to keep making something different and I have to find the time to make something different all the time.
I eat the same meals over and over again. I like them. So, the key here is I think you need meals that you love. You love them, right? You're excited every time you get to eat them. And then if you feel like you're getting a little bored or a little tired of them, you can change up the flavor or you can kind of add a little something extra or new or change up the fruit or the whatever, right? But essentially keeping them the same. Now, but you have to love them because if you are eating foods you hate or they don't agree with you, or maybe your gut doesn't like the particular ingredient, you're not going to sustain it. You're not going to stay consistent, right? So the key is to really get to know yourself, understand what works for you, understand what's an easy go-to meal when you're busy. Don't rely on processed food like protein bars, protein powders, and things like that. Try to eat as many whole foods as possible and make them protein first, right? So have enough protein in each meal to make it a balanced meal, have enough carbs in each meal, and have a little bit of fat for flavoring. But yeah, I mean, this is what works for me. This is what works for every single one of my clients, no exception. And it's just a matter of rewiring and reframing and restructuring our thought patterns that no, you don't need to have a different meal every time. You can have the same thing over and over again. It's not the end of the world. But it's the same thing with like consumerism, right? I was just thinking about this the other day. We're programmed to think that we constantly have to keep buying things, right? Like we constantly have to buy shoes and purses and this and that. God forbid somebody sees you wearing the same outfit, like, and it's the same thing. I feel like it translates into our nutrition. Like we're constantly have to like be running in this hamster wheel. No, stop.
Well, that's it. And we never used to be that way because we never had access to different foods all year round. You know what I mean? Like you ate what you could grow or what you could get at the market because that's what was in season. But now, because, we're almost so spoiled because, food is transported around the world, you can go to our supermarket and you can get watermelon, 365 days of the year. So I think that sort of just the pure amount of choice when you go to the supermarket can be a bit overwhelming. But like you said, even if you just pick sort of, 3 to 5 meals that are like your basics that you have on rotation, they can always just be backups. And then if you feel like something different, you have the option. But otherwise, you've got those sort of foods always present in your pantry and you've got to go to so that you're not reaching out for something super sugary because you're hungry and you don't have anything in the fridge.
Yes. So the way that I look at it is the way I used to perceive things is we had Easter for breakfast every day. We had Thanksgiving dinner for lunch every day and Christmas dinner for dinner every day. And it was all these big elaborate meals. And you're only supposed to eat 3 times a day according to society and this and that. And I'm like, wow, it couldn't possibly be any further from what actually works. Because on top of that, I don't think that evolutionary wise, our bodies have adapted to what's going on environmentally in our lifestyle right now. Right. And I was just talking to somebody else about that in the, prehistoric times. They used to go hunting. They would get a boar and they would eat that for a month. The whole tribe with maybe like 1 or 2 vegetables. That was it. And now we have 5,000 different options, but we haven't changed DNA wise that much where we can handle 10,000 different options that are not even real food at this point. Because 80% of the supermarket is synthetic food, right? Only about 20% of the area in the supermarket is actual real food. And so we haven't adapted biologically to be able to handle that. And I think, this is the result. It's what we're seeing now happening with everybody's health.
Mm. And like you said, that's where we just need to really go back to those basics, stick to those whole foods, think about your protein, carbs, and fat, and it works.
Yes, yes, it does.
Now, before we wrap up our episode today, is there anything that you'd like to highlight or discuss that we haven't covered yet?
I think that a lot of people feel hopeless and a lot of people are very discouraged. That's what I'm seeing out there. And I just want to tell if anybody's listening and you feel that way, I want you to stop and I want you to breathe and really exactly what Kate said. Do exactly what Kate said. Bring it down back to the basics. If it's not real food, you don't know where it came from, how it was produced, if it comes in a box, in a bag, in a package, put it away, throw it away. Focus on whole foods, focus on things that have one ingredient, okay? One ingredient, super simple. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers, things like that. Celery, broccoli, squash. Focus on lean proteins. There's tons of options in the supermarket for that. 99% turkey, 99% ground chicken, 96% beef, shrimp, white fish, cod, all these things. And use fat as your flavoring. And just doing this, you're going to feel better. Now, if you feel like you're ready, add in movement. You don't have to start with anything extreme. You can start with walking. You can start with yoga. You can start strength training with Pilates, core strengthening. things like that. And then when you feel more confident, you can approach weightlifting. But just this alone, you will instantly feel better.
Mm, I agree, 100%. The basics work. And I think sometimes, like you said, we feel so overwhelmed, we just don't know where to start. And then we get that sort of, paralysis where we just go, oh, it's too much, I won't do anything. We get sidetracked. Whereas you just pick one thing, stick with one thing, see that through first. And then once that, feels like it's a habit, then you can look at something else.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, where can our listeners reach out, connect with you, find out more about your programs and retreats?
Yes, so you can find out about my coaching group on thehouseofrose.com. So it's THE House of OF Rose.com. There's coaching and retreats both on the website, and you can also find me on Instagram. My name is How Good Can It Get?
That's a great name.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, I'll link those all up in the show notes too. So listeners head across to those show notes and check out those links. But Terry, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's been a really great conversation. And I think, the more of this information we can get out to women in the world, the more empowering it is to really help support them as we, go through perimenopause and menopause and age.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more, Kate. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.